I opened my eyes slowly, the hospital ceiling blurry above me. Tubes and machines beeped softly nearby. My entire body felt numb, but one thought was clear as day. I couldn't wait to go home. But as I reached for my phone on the bedside table, my stomach dropped. Notifications flooded the screen. Messages, missed calls, emails, and one particularly chilling alert from my real estate agent. "Congratulations, Brian. Your house has officially been sold." Panic surged through me. Sold? How could my house be sold? I never even listed it. My breathing quickened as I fumbled with the phone, trying to type out a desperate message. Before I could finish, Louise walked into the room, her heels clicking coldly against the tile. Her gaze was indifferent, distant, as though we were strangers instead of lovers who'd spent 2 years together. I quickly typed on my phone, my fingers trembling. "Louise, what's going on? Did you sell my house?" She didn't bother to deny it. With a nonchalant glance, she simply nodded. "You've been in here a long time, Brian. Medical bills aren't cheap. Someone had to pay for your treatment." My heart pounded, and I furiously typed again. "It was my house. You had no right." Louise sighed, rolling her eyes as if bored by the conversation. "You're overreacting. It was practical. I needed money and—" "You weren't exactly awake to object." Anger surged through me, but outwardly I remained composed, merely staring at her in disbelief. Inside, I cursed her betrayal, her selfishness, and how easily she'd thrown away what we'd built together. Yet Louise suddenly flinched, as if she'd heard every bitter thought clearly. Her expression shifted, eyes narrowing suspiciously. But before I could dwell on it, she regained her composure and forced a smile. "Besides, Brian, it's just a house. We can buy another." But I didn't want another. I wanted mine. The place my parents left me. The place filled with memories of their laughter and warmth. I had trusted Louise, let her into my life despite being mute, believing she'd accepted me. Yet here she was, selling my inheritance without a shred of remorse. But Louise had underestimated me. If she thought I would simply lie here helplessly, allowing her to destroy everything precious to me, she was mistaken. If Louise wanted war, I'd give her war. I typed another message and turned the screen toward her, watching her expression harden as she read it. "Don't worry, Louise. 2 can play this game. Brian." I was mute from birth. Growing up, everyone treated me with pitying glances or awkward silence. But my parents were different. They always smiled warmly, made me feel normal, and loved me without any reservation. My father was a respected businessman. My mother, a gentle, caring woman who would always reassure me, "Brian, your voice doesn't define you. Your heart does." But their warmth didn't last long. When I was 17, my father passed away suddenly from a heart attack. My mother never recovered from the shock and soon followed him. Left alone, I inherited our family's comfortable estate, a spacious house filled with memories, their voices, laughter, and warmth forever lingering in every corner. It was everything I had left of them. Money wasn't an issue. My father had left behind enough wealth to ensure I'd never struggle financially. But loneliness haunted me. Being mute, I had few friends. People found it awkward to communicate with someone who couldn't speak, and soon my isolation grew deeper. I learned to keep a composed exterior while my inner world spiraled into bitterness and resentment, until Louise appeared in my life. She was beautiful, stunningly beautiful, with long dark hair that cascaded down her shoulders and eyes that sparkled with confidence and ambition. Louise was vibrant, outgoing, the kind of person who effortlessly became the center of attention wherever she went. And she wasn't shy about showing off. We met at a company party organized by one of my late father's business partners. From the moment she approached me, smiling warmly and unfazed by my disability, I felt something change inside. I wondered if perhaps, for the first time, someone saw me instead of my inability to speak. But soon, I found out the real reason she approached me. Louise was ambitious. Her family's once successful business had collapsed, and she needed money urgently to regain her lost status. To her, I was merely an easy target, a mute, wealthy orphan, desperate for companionship. The heir to my parents, fortune, lonely and vulnerable. The perfect mark. But even after learning this harsh truth, I pretended I didn't care. My mother's dying wish had been for me to find happiness, to have someone who could care for me when she was gone. Perhaps Louise didn't truly love me, but at least I wouldn't be alone. Our relationship was built on convenience rather than affection. Louise enjoyed the luxuries my wealth provided: designer clothes, exotic vacations, expensive dinners with her friends, while I silently watched, emotionless on the surface, yet inwardly tormented by loneliness. And yet, the more I tolerated her extravagance, the less respect she seemed to have for me. Louise became colder, treating me with disdain behind closed doors. At parties, she'd openly flirt with other men, knowing I couldn't confront her verbally. She'd throw private gatherings at my house without informing me, knowing I'd find out only when I returned to strangers lounging around, treating my home like a playground. She assumed because I was silent, I had no voice at all. But she was wrong. Documented everything, recorded every betrayal, every humiliation. I built a quiet fortress of evidence, waiting patiently for a chance to strike back. My silence wasn't weakness. It was strength in reserve, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. But I didn't foresee the crisis that lay ahead. One evening, I collapsed. When I awoke, I was lying in a hospital bed, tubes and wires attached. To my body, my diagnosis grim. An illness I'd inherited from my father, rare and devastating. It was treatable, but required prolonged hospitalization. Louise visited occasionally, mostly to maintain appearances. She would sit by my bedside, texting on her phone, barely looking up. My caretakers offered more compassion than she ever did. Even then, I masked my emotions behind a polite smile, never allowing her to sense my growing disgust. But Louise was far more ruthless than I'd imagined. While I lay helpless in my hospital bed, she did something unforgivable. She sold my house. The home my parents left me, without my consent, believing I wouldn't or couldn't do anything about it. The first sign of her betrayal came from a barrage of notifications from the real estate agent. Your property at Meadowbrook has been successfully transferred. Congratulations. Meadowbrook, my family's cherished home, gone. Just like that. Insides twisted. Rage boiled beneath my calm exterior. I clutched my phone, feeling utterly helpless. Moments later, Louise entered my room, her expression carefree, eyes glittering with a chilling arrogance. Seeing my disbelief, she casually explained, "It was a great offer, Brian. You weren't using it anyway, lying in this hospital bed. Be practical." I silently glared at her, fingers shaking as I typed, "That was my parents' home." "You had no right." She rolled her eyes, indifferent. "You're always so dramatic. Houses come and go. You have enough money to buy another. Grow up." In that instant, I felt a deep sense of betrayal. Louise hadn't just stolen my property. She'd taken away my memories, my dignity, and my trust. But in her arrogance, she underestimated me, believing my silence made me weak. Inside, my resolve hardened, bitter anger transforming into a single, focused determination. Louise would pay. Quietly, secretly, I began making plans. Louise had forgotten something important. Just because I couldn't speak didn't mean I couldn't fight back, and revenge, unlike words, required no voice. After Louise casually left my hospital room, I lay there, staring at the ceiling. The familiar hum of hospital equipment faded away, replaced by an unbearable silence that echoed louder than any sound I'd ever heard. My heart felt hollow, robbed of my home, robbed of memories I'd carefully preserved since my parents passed away. My parents had bought that house shortly after their marriage. My father had carried my mother across its threshold, and years later, my mother had carried me through the same door after I was born. Each corner of the house held cherished memories: Christmas mornings by the fireplace, late-night talks at the kitchen table, and afternoons spent quietly in the garden. Louise had known all this. I'd shown her photographs, silently pointing to each picture as she listened, pretending to be touched by my memories. But now I knew every nod, every sympathetic gaze, had been nothing more than a calculated act. Over the next few days, I learned even more details about Louise's betrayal from our mutual friend, Daniel. He visited me hesitantly, carefully sitting on the chair beside my bed, as though afraid of disturbing me. After a few awkward pleasantries, he finally asked the question he'd come for. "Brian," he said softly, glancing down at the floor, "did you really sell your house to help Louise open a café?" I froze. A café? My confusion quickly turned into silent anger. Louise hadn't just sold my family home, she'd invested the money into her own business. A business I knew nothing about. Furious, I typed quickly on my phone screen, my fingers trembling. "What café? She sold my home without my permission." Daniel's eyes widened. He swallowed nervously and ran his hand through his hair, clearly uncomfortable with the news he was about to share. "She said, she told everyone you agreed to invest. She's already bought a shop, started renovations, and everything. She even named it after herself, Louise's Café." I felt my chest tighten, anger flooding through me. The audacity was beyond belief. Not only had Louise betrayed me, but she'd lied to everyone we knew, making herself appear as a caring, supportive girlfriend helping a mute, vulnerable partner. I clenched my fists under the blankets. I couldn't scream, couldn't shout. My silence trapped me, isolating my rage inside. But anger was a powerful fuel, and silently my resolve strengthened. Louise had taken from me without hesitation. She had thought me helpless. She was wrong. Once, Daniel left. I reached for my phone and began typing quickly, contacting my financial advisor, my lawyer, anyone who could help. The café Louise bought had once been her family home. It was a beautiful old building located downtown, an inheritance she'd received from her grandparents. Louise loved that place. She'd often bragged about how her café would soon be the most popular spot in town, and now that café would be mine. Louise had underestimated me. Despite being mute, my father had taught me one thing clearly. Money speaks louder than words. Within a week, all arrangements were finalized. The day the sale went through, I watched the notification appear on my phone, accompanied by a strange satisfaction. Purchase successful. Louise's Café, now registered under Brian. Congratulations. The next afternoon, Louise stormed into my hospital room, furious and disheveled. Her usually perfect hair was messy, her eyes wide with panic. She threw documents on my bed, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. "Brian," she snapped, "what the hell did you do?" I glanced down at the documents, calmly picking up my phone to type. "You sold my family home. I bought your café. Now we're even." She laughed bitterly, pacing around the small room, hands trembling. "Are you crazy? Do you have any idea how important that café was to me? It was my family's last legacy." I almost laughed. The irony was incredible. She'd stolen my heritage for her business without a second thought. But the moment the tables turned, I was the villain. I typed, fingers steady, despite my emotions churning inside. And my house wasn't important to me? Louise suddenly froze, eyes narrowing. Her anger quickly softened into something else, a faint shadow of guilt. "Brian, I didn't think—" Of course, she hadn't thought. She had seen me as weak, a pushover, incapable of fighting back. I stared into her eyes, daring her to continue her weak justification, silently challenging her to finish the sentence. But Louise quickly recovered, pride overshadowing any remorse. She stood straight, defiant once more. "Fine, you won this round, but this won't end well for either of us." With that threat hanging between us, she turned sharply and left, slamming the door behind her. The silence afterward was deafening. But, for once, the quiet didn't suffocate me. Instead, it felt empowering. Louise had humiliated me, mocked my inability to speak, believing I had no way of fighting back. Yet, within just days, I had taken back control. Still, behind the cold satisfaction, something else stirred, a deep, unsettling sadness. Revenge was bitter medicine. It tasted sweet at first, but in the end, left me hollow. I sat back on the hospital bed, staring at the closed door Louise had stormed through, realizing this wasn't over. My silent war with Louise had just begun, and I didn't know how far either. Of us was willing to go. But one thing was clear. Louise had underestimated me once. She wouldn't make the same mistake again. The battle lines were drawn, and in this ruthless game of betrayal and revenge, there would be no winners. Only survivors. As Louise stormed out, the room plunged into an eerie quiet, broken only by the steady hum of medical machines. I stared at the closed door, bitterness seeping into my heart, darkening every thought. Outside, I appeared calm, collected, almost detached. Nurses who entered my room praised me for my strength, admired my quiet dignity. But none of them could hear the storm raging silently inside my mind, a constant, relentless turmoil that I could never voice aloud. "Louise, how could you? You knew exactly what that house meant to me. That home was the only thing left of my parents. Their memories, their warmth, were still alive there. Selling it wasn't just betrayal, it was sacrilege." Suddenly, the door opened again. My heart momentarily lifted, hoping foolishly it might be Louise returning to apologize. But instead, my caretaker, Margaret, walked in, holding a small bouquet of lilies. "I saw your girlfriend leaving," she said softly, setting the flowers beside me. "Is everything okay?" I nodded politely, typing out a lie on my phone. "Everything is fine." Margaret studied me carefully, her gentle eyes filled with concern. She'd been caring for me since I first fell ill. She knew the truth, that nothing was ever truly okay, but she respected my silence. She placed the lilies beside me and smiled sadly. "These were your mother's favorites, weren't they?" I nodded, slowly touching one delicate petal, memories flooding me. Margaret had been with my family since my father's time. She had seen me at my best and worst, and she knew, probably better than anyone, how deeply Louise had wounded me. After a pause, Margaret asked hesitantly, "Brian, did something happen?" Louise seemed upset. My fingers hovered over my phone, tempted to spill everything, to pour out all the pent-up anger, betrayal, and frustration I had silently endured. But what was the point? The truth wouldn't change what Louise had done. So, instead, I typed simply, "It's complicated." Margaret sighed gently. "I know it must be hard. But sometimes keeping everything bottled inside does more damage than letting it out. Even if you can't speak, Brian, your feelings deserve to be heard." I smiled weakly, my heart heavy. How could I tell her I had already spoken in my own way, by buying Louise's café? I'd acted purely out of revenge, and now that it was done, I felt emptier than ever. That evening, alone again, I scrolled through my phone, checking updates about Louise. My heart twisted when I saw she'd already shared news of losing her café online. Her friends were rallying around her, sympathizing, condemning whoever had stolen her dreams. Her dreams? I scoffed inwardly. She never even considered mine. I spent hours awake that night, haunted by my thoughts. Louise had never loved me. That much was clear. But had I ever truly loved her? Or had I just desperately hoped someone, anyone, would accept me? Maybe we had used each other. I offered her money, and she offered the illusion of companionship. But illusions fade, and when they did, the reality underneath was ugly and cruel. In the days that followed, Louise never returned to the hospital, but rumors did. Mutual friends visited, casually mentioning how Louise portrayed herself as the victim, robbed, betrayed by the mute man who pretended to love her. Pretended? I gripped my sheets so tightly my knuckles turned white. Even though I was mute, I had never lied with my heart. Louise, however, had never known me, not truly. She had never bothered to learn my sign language, never cared enough to communicate on my terms. To her, I was a checkbook, silent and obedient, unable to protest. My resentment simmered, boiling silently beneath a composed exterior. Doctors and nurses complimented my recovery, but none knew my real illness, a heart heavy with betrayal and bitterness. And then, in the middle of the night, another visitor arrived, uninvited and unwanted. Louise's ex-boyfriend, Aaron. He sauntered into my room arrogantly, leaning against the doorframe, his smile arrogant and cruel. "Looks like Louise finally got bored playing nurse to the mute guy," he sneered. I glared, my pulse racing with anger. "Relax," he continued, eyeing my silence mockingly. "Honestly, man, what did you expect? You're not exactly husband material. Louise always needed someone who could express himself." Aaron leaned closer, deliberately lowering his voice. "She came crying to me, you know, told me how you maliciously took away her café. She asked me to help her. And guess what, Brian? I'm here to do just that." My hands shook violently as I reached for my phone, typing furiously, "Leave now." But Aaron laughed coldly, reading the screen before smirking again. "Or what? You'll scream for help?" He straightened up and took a step back, smiling cruelly. "Louise played you, Brian. She needed money. You had plenty, and honestly, who's going to believe your side? You're just a rich guy trying to buy love because you're too pathetic to earn it." He left without waiting for a response, his laughter echoing down the hallway, a sound more painful than physical blows could ever be. That night, I sat awake, unable to silence my racing thoughts. Maybe Aaron was right. Maybe my silence made me pathetic. But deep inside, I knew that wasn't true. My mother had always told me my voice didn't define my worth, and yet Louise and Aaron made me doubt everything I'd once believed. The emotional wounds Louise had inflicted weren't visible, but they cut deeper than any physical scar. She had made me doubt myself, doubt my worth, and now I faced a terrifying truth. Louise had broken something inside me that couldn't be fixed with money or revenge. She'd taken away my trust, my hope, leaving nothing but an emptiness that threatened to swallow me whole. But then, as dawn broke through the window, casting gentle rays across my hospital bed, I felt something else, a quiet determination. I couldn't let Louise's betrayal define me. I couldn't let her break me entirely. Inside, I whispered to myself, even though no one would hear, I might be silent, but I still have strength. And from now on, Louise would see that silence can speak louder than any words. The days passed quietly, yet my heart found no peace. Louise's betrayal lingered in my mind, and Aaron's taunts echoed endlessly in my thoughts. But just as I believed things couldn't worsen, another devastating blow shattered whatever fragments of stability remained. One afternoon, as I sat quietly scrolling through emails, my phone vibrated. The caller ID flashed, Margaret. Immediately, my heart filled with dread. Margaret rarely called directly. Something was very wrong. I quickly answered, typing a short greeting. "Margaret, is everything okay?" Her voice trembled over the phone, heavy with sadness. "Brian, I'm so sorry to tell you this, but the hospital called. Your test results came back." A pause stretched painfully. My heart pounded violently against my chest, my breath shallow and tense. I forced myself to type, fingers shaking, "Tell me." Margaret hesitated, her voice barely above a whisper. "The treatment isn't working, Brian. The illness is advancing faster than the doctors anticipated. They say—" Her voice broke. She took a deep breath before continuing, struggling to steady herself. They say you have only a few months left. I felt as if the world had collapsed beneath me. My vision blurred, and the room spun wildly around me. The cruel irony sank in. I had just reclaimed some measure of dignity, only for life to snatch away my future entirely. I dropped the phone, hands trembling uncontrollably. A few months, that was all I had left. What had my life amounted to? A fortune I couldn't spend, a home I had lost, and a love that had never truly existed. A nurse entered my room, concern etched on her face, but I waved her away silently. I couldn't bear pity right now. The realization hit me again, harsher this time. My life was ending. My wealth, my revenge against Louise, none of it mattered anymore. But the universe wasn't finished torturing me yet. As night fell, my door opened once again, and Louise stepped inside cautiously. Her expression wasn't defiant or angry. For the first time, she looked genuinely shaken, eyes red from crying. I stared at her silently, my expression cold and guarded. Why had she returned now when my heart lay shattered by worse news? She took a cautious step toward me, her voice soft, filled with an unfamiliar tenderness. "Brian, I heard the news. Margaret called me." My chest tightened. "How dare Margaret involve her?" Louise continued, her voice trembling with emotion. "Why? Didn't you tell me how serious it was? Why did you hide it?" I typed bitterly, showing her the screen with unhidden anger. "Would it have mattered? You didn't care. You sold my house while I lay helpless. My illness never mattered to you before. Why should it matter now?" She flinched, hurt visible in her eyes, and looked away. "I know I've made terrible mistakes. But you weren't supposed to get hurt, not like this." I shook my head slowly, disbelief consuming me. Louise finally showed remorse, but only because now she knew I was dying. How convenient. Louise took a breath, trying to compose herself. "The cafe wasn't just a business, Brian. It was my grandparents' legacy. Losing it broke my heart. But now I realize what I did to you was unforgivable." I hesitated, momentarily caught off guard by the vulnerability in her voice. Was she sincere, or was this another manipulative act? She drew closer, her eyes pleading. "I lied to myself, convinced myself it was justified. I thought your silence meant you didn't truly care, until I saw the pain in your eyes. And now, knowing you might not have long, it's clear how terribly I've treated you." I typed slowly, each word deliberate, each letter weighted with my pain. "It took me dying for you to realize I'm human too." Louise covered her face, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm so sorry. You deserved better, from everyone, especially from me." A fragile silence filled the room, interrupted only by her quiet sobs. I wanted to hate her, to revel in her tears, and feel justified in my bitterness. But instead, her remorse only magnified my emptiness. I typed again, fingers slow, burdened with exhaustion. "It doesn't matter anymore. Just go." But Louise didn't move. Instead, she gathered her courage, wiping her tears. "I'm not leaving, Brian. At least not yet. If you only have a little time left, then let me try to make it right." My heart wavered, torn between the desperate wish for genuine connection and the justified resentment that protected me from more pain. Could I risk trusting her again, even now? Louise took another step closer, her eyes searching mine. You once cared for me. I know you did. Maybe you still do. Let me stay, Brian, even if you never forgive me. I met her gaze, silently struggling with a choice that might break me entirely. If I let her back in, I'd risk my fragile heart again. But if I refused, I'd spend what little time I had left alone, drowning in resentment. Finally, my trembling fingers moved, typing the words that sealed my uncertain fate. Stay, if you must. But know this, Louise, I'm not forgiving you. Louise nodded, quietly accepting my terms. I know, but even if forgiveness never comes, let me at least ease your pain. As she sat silently by my bedside, I knew one thing clearly. Louise had brought chaos into my life, and now, as my end neared, she'd become both my greatest enemy and my only comfort. And for the first time, I felt truly helpless. Trapped not by silence, but by a heart stubbornly refusing to let go. Days turned into weeks, each moment heavier than the last. My body weakened, but strangely, my mind felt clearer. Perhaps approaching death stripped away all pretenses, leaving only stark, undeniable truth. Louise had kept her word, never leaving my side, caring, attentive, compassionate. Yet every gentle gesture she made was tinged with regret and guilt. Sometimes, as I lay awake at night, I'd glance over to find her quietly weeping, careful not to disturb me. Her tears confused me, unsettling my heart further. Could guilt alone produce such genuine sorrow? One afternoon, as sunlight filled the hospital room, I noticed Louise sitting quietly beside me, looking drained. She hadn't slept well in days. Softly, I typed, "Go home and rest, Louise. You don't have to stay every minute." She shook her head stubbornly, smiling faintly. "No, Brian. I wasted too much time already. I'm not leaving you again." I sighed internally, frustrated yet touched by her stubborn dedication. Perhaps she truly had changed. But could a few weeks of compassion erase years of cruelty? I wasn't sure. That evening, Margaret entered my room, hesitating at the door. Louise looked at her curiously, but Margaret kept her eyes on me. "Brian, I need to speak to you alone," Margaret said firmly. Louise looked concerned, yet nodded quietly, stepping outside. Margaret waited until the door closed before pulling up a chair next to my bed. She took a shaky breath, then spoke carefully. "Brian, there's something you must know." Louise asked. "Me not to tell you, but it's unfair to keep secrets, especially now." My heart raced nervously, and I typed quickly, "Tell me everything." Margaret looked pained as she continued. "The donor for your surgery, it wasn't anonymous. It was Louise." Shock washed over me, confusion flooding my mind. I quickly typed, "What do you mean?" Margaret explained gently, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Louise secretly arranged to donate part of her liver for your transplant. Your illness had damaged your liver irreparably, Brian. You only survived because of her. She insisted I never tell you. She wanted you to hate her less without feeling obligated." My hands trembled violently, disbelief gripping me. Louise, the woman who had betrayed me, humiliated me, mocked my inability to speak, had sacrificed herself to save me? Margaret squeezed my hand gently. She sold your house because she needed immediate funds. She thought you'd have time to recover financially, never imagining things would escalate so badly. When she realized how deeply she'd hurt you, she was devastated. I couldn't think clearly, my mind spinning wildly. Louise's betrayal hadn't been greed or selfishness. It was desperation, twisted by terrible choices. And my revenge, buying. Her café, the place she cherished most, had become a knife plunged cruelly into her heart. Margaret sighed, rising to leave. I won't tell you how to feel, Brian, but know this. Louise made mistakes, terrible ones, but her love for you was never fake. She risked everything, her health, her legacy, to save your life. Margaret left quietly, leaving me alone with an overwhelming storm of emotions, guilt, anger, confusion, and an unexpected longing crashed within me, breaking down walls I had built around my heart. As I struggled to comprehend everything, the door opened and Louise returned. Seeing my distressed face, she grew worried. Brian, are you okay? I stared at her silently, searching her face for signs of deceit. All I saw was raw, genuine worry. I typed slowly, uncertainly. Why didn't you tell me you were my donor? Louise's face went pale, eyes widening in shock. She stumbled backward, steadying herself against a chair. Her voice shook as she whispered, Margaret promised. I typed insistently, you risked your life. Why hide that from me? Louise hesitated, clearly conflicted, before finally breaking down. Because I didn't want you to forgive me out of pity. I didn't deserve your forgiveness, Brian, not after how horribly I treated you. I wanted you to live without feeling indebted to someone like me. She wiped tears hastily, continuing emotionally. I sold your house in panic. Medical bills mounted quickly, and I panicked. I didn't stop to consider your feelings, your memories. I destroyed everything, and once I realized how deeply I hurt you, I couldn't face it. I typed back slowly, each word reflecting my confusion and pain. But you let me hate you. You allowed me to believe you were heartless. Louise shook her head sadly. Because it was easier that way. Easier than admitting how badly I had failed. Easier than confessing I'd fallen for the man I wronged so deeply. If you hated me, at least you'd never pity me. You deserved dignity, not obligation. My chest tightened painfully. She had suffered silently, allowing herself to become my enemy so I could live without guilt. Yet, I'd punished her ruthlessly in return. A long silence stretched between us, filled only by her quiet sobs. Finally, I typed carefully, my heart aching deeply. Why didn't you leave sooner? Why did you stay, even after I bought your café? Louise looked into my eyes, her voice barely a whisper. Because I owed you that much, Brian. And because somewhere along the way I stopped pretending and truly loved you. Her words resonated deeply, striking chords buried beneath bitterness and resentment. Could love survive betrayal? Could forgiveness grow from pain so severe? I closed my eyes, memories flooding me. The quiet evenings we shared, moments when she'd gently squeezed my hand in crowded places, dinners she'd made awkwardly yet sincerely. Had I ignored genuine feelings beneath? Her mistakes focusing only on my silent pain? Slowly, my fingers moved again. I hurt you too. I took your dreams as revenge, blind to your sacrifice. I'm so sorry, Louise. Louise's tears fell harder. No, Brian, don't apologize. You had every right. I cut her off by shaking my head firmly, typing, "We both did things. We regret. Maybe we're both at fault." She stared silently at my words, her expression slowly shifting from sorrow to quiet acceptance. "Maybe you're right," she whispered softly. I typed again, feeling a strange sense of peace finally begin to soothe my turbulent heart. I won't be here much longer, but maybe there's still time to start again. No more secrets, no more revenge. Louise nodded slowly, a small, hopeful smile breaking through her tears. I promise, Brian. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely lighter, as though invisible chains of bitterness had finally loosened. Louise's sincerity was undeniable. Her remorse had carved genuine empathy within her. I typed one final message, hesitating, only briefly before revealing it. Louise, I never hated you, not completely. Even at my angriest, some part of me wanted to forgive you. Now I want to try. Her eyes filled with warmth and relief. Quietly, she moved closer, gently touching my hand. I don't deserve your forgiveness, she whispered. But thank you. I felt warmth spread through me, understanding we had crossed an impossible chasm. Louise had wronged me, but she'd also healed me, physically and emotionally, in ways neither of us could have predicted. Still, beneath this newfound peace lay sorrow. I had limited time left, and we both knew it. Our reconciliation was tragically brief, bittersweet in the cruel face of fate. Louise squeezed my hand gently. Let's not think about tomorrow, Brian. Let's just be us, right now. I nodded, finally accepting the painful truth. Love wasn't perfect. It was messy, painful, but worth every broken piece. As twilight filled the room, softening shadows around us, I knew my time was short, but strangely, I wasn't afraid anymore. Louise and I had journeyed through betrayal, revenge, illness, and despair, yet emerged closer than ever. In the quiet room, her presence by my side, a thought occurred to me, whispering comfort into my heart. Even in silence, I had found my voice, again. And Louise, the woman who once sold my house, had unknowingly given me back something far more precious, hope. My surgery was scheduled for early morning, and the night before, sleep evaded me. My heart was a strange mixture of hope and fear. I gazed through the window at the stars, each tiny point of light reminding me of everything I had lost, but also everything I'd rediscovered. Louise sat quietly beside me, her eyes fixed on a book. She was pretending to read, but every few minutes, her gaze flickered toward me. I could feel her worry radiating through the quiet room. I gently reached for my phone and typed, "Louise, stop worrying. I'll be fine." She smiled softly, shaking her head. "I can't help it, Brian. You're too calm, considering everything. Aren't you scared at all?" I typed again, slowly choosing each word with care. I used to fear death. Now what scares me most is leaving without making things right. But you've given me that chance. I'm grateful. Her eyes filled with tears. She set the book aside, taking my hand into hers. Brian, I owe you so much more. I'm the one who should be grateful for your forgiveness, your kindness. I squeezed her hand gently, feeling a sense of peace. There was no resentment left between us, no more bitterness or regret, only two people who had finally found honesty in their most vulnerable moments. The night passed quietly. By dawn, doctors and nurses entered, preparing me for surgery. Louise stood beside my bed, reluctant to let go of my hand. Just before I was wheeled into the operating room, Louise whispered softly, "I'll be right here waiting, Brian. Come back to me, okay?" I nodded, squeezing her hand firmly in silent promise. The surgery was long, exhausting for everyone involved, but it went smoothly. Hours later, I awoke groggy, disoriented, but alive. When my vision cleared, Louise was sitting by my bedside, her face glowing with relief. She whispered warmly, "Welcome back, Brian." Days passed, turning into weeks. Louise became my constant companion, patiently helping me through the long road to recovery. Our bond, forged from pain and tempered by forgiveness, deepened with each passing day. Months later, fully healed, I finally returned home, not to my old house, nor to Louise's café, but to a small, charming place we'd chosen together. It wasn't extravagant, yet it felt more precious than anything I'd ever owned, because it was ours. On my first evening back, Louise surprised me by cooking dinner. She wasn't skilled in the kitchen, but the gesture warmed me more deeply than I could express. After eating, we sat quietly together by the fireplace, watching the flames dance softly. She spoke softly, breaking the gentle silence. "Brian, I've been thinking about something. You've never heard me say it clearly, so here it goes. I love you, not because of guilt or pity or gratitude, but simply because I do." Her words stunned me, filling my heart with warmth. For once, no doubts clouded my mind. I smiled genuinely, typing carefully. "I love you too, Louise. Even in silence, that's always been true." She leaned closer, resting her head against my shoulder, and for the first time, silence didn't feel like isolation. It felt like comfort, warmth, and love. Life settled into a quiet, comfortable rhythm. We shared our days with simple joy, gardening in our backyard, going for peaceful walks in the park, sharing gentle laughter as we navigated life's daily challenges, together. But one afternoon, Louise hesitantly mentioned the café. "Brian, have you thought about the café recently?" I hesitated briefly, memories of our painful past resurfacing. I typed slowly, "Do you want it back?" She shook her head firmly. "No. That place caused too much pain for both of us. But I was thinking, maybe we can give it a new life. Together." I considered her words carefully, then nodded. Soon after, Louise and I reopened the café, not as Louise's alone, but as a shared project. We renamed it Quiet Hearts Café, reflecting our journey. The community quickly embraced our story, not as one of betrayal and revenge, but as one of redemption and hope. Word spread quickly. Friends who once whispered behind our backs now admired our courage and resilience. But more importantly, Louise and I found a new purpose. The café wasn't just a business. It was proof that love, forgiveness, and understanding could overcome even the deepest scars. Then, one afternoon, Louise received an unexpected call from Aaron. She hesitated, glancing at me anxiously. "Brian, it's Aaron. He wants to talk." My jaw tightened instinctively, anger briefly resurfacing. But this time, I felt strong enough to face my past without bitterness. I typed calmly, "Let him come." Aaron appeared later that evening, humbled and awkward. He stood in the doorway, eyes cast downward in shame. "Brian, Louise, I'm here to apologize. I was cruel, arrogant. I treated you both horribly." I stared at him silently for a long moment. Finally, I typed clearly and showed him the screen. "You hurt us deeply, but carrying bitterness is exhausting. I choose forgiveness, not for you, but for me. For us." Aaron seemed genuinely moved, nodding slowly, humbled by the sincerity of my words. After that day, he faded quietly from our lives, but left behind a sense of closure. Louise and I moved forward, building something beautiful together, day by day. Our café quickly became popular, a space known for quiet, warmth, acceptance, and love. The silence that had once defined my isolation now welcomed everyone, offering peace and comfort to those who entered. Time passed gently, our lives now defined not by what we'd lost, but by what we had rebuilt. Yet, one quiet afternoon, Louise came to me nervously, holding something behind her back. "Brian," she began softly, "there's something I want to ask." Curious, I nodded, watching carefully. Slowly, she revealed a tiny box. Inside was a simple gold band, beautiful yet understated. Louise's eyes sparkled with tears of happiness and nerves. "Will you marry me, Brian?" My heart raced with disbelief, yet warmth filled every corner of my soul. Without hesitation, I typed my reply. "Yes, Louise. Of course, I'll marry you." She threw her arms around me, laughing joyfully. And in that moment, I felt the final piece of my wounded heart fall into place. Love had found me, despite silence, betrayal, and pain. Louise had once been my greatest enemy, then my deepest regret. Now, she had become my future. We married quietly, surrounded only by those closest to us. As we stood hand in hand, saying our vows, mine typed out, hers spoken aloud, I felt no shame in my silence. Instead, it became a symbol of our love's strength, unspoken, yet deeper than words could express. And on our wedding night, as we lay together beneath a quiet sky, Louise softly whispered, "Brian, do you remember when you said your voice didn't define your worth?" I nodded, holding her closer. She continued gently, "Well, it doesn't define our love either. You never needed words to reach my heart." I smiled, kissing her forehead gently, and in my heart, I silently whispered something only Louise could hear clearly. "I love you. Now. Forever. And always." Our journey had begun in bitterness and betrayal. But now, We'd found peace in forgiveness and love. And though my voice would never speak aloud, our hearts had found their language, a quiet, eternal melody that only we could hear.